Hey everyone. Hi. Nice to see you. Good morning. Good afternoon. I am here today to talk to Rabbi Sandra Lawson. And uh, um, sorry, this is the part where I always screw it up. Um, and uh, so we are planning on talking about the Jewish community right now and what being Jewish means, uh, especially to her. Oh, here she is. So I'm inviting her on right now.
I'm here somewhere. Where are you? Okay, can you see me or not?
Okay, so we're actually live right now.
Oh, okay.
So say hi to the folks.
Hello.
And we've got a couple people in there. And so what I wanted to do today is, as I'm wishing everyone a good morning or a good afternoon, and welcoming them to Freedom Over Fascism Live.
There we are.
Okay. We're good. No, that's right. That's fine. So, everyone, I would like to introduce you to Rabbi Sandra. I started following you, Rabbi, on Juneteenth, 2020.
Oh, wow.
That's right. That's an actual date. You were doing a Kabbalat Shabbat on Zoom, I think at Yale Hillel. And I gathered my family and we watched because we weren't going to be going anywhere. And since then, I've followed and really admired what you have to say. So before we get started and before I introduce you and let you introduce you more yourself, everyone out there, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to both of us. At the top of your screen, you should see a subscription. And if you can keep pressing those there, Rabbi, you're in the chat. If you can keep pressing those red hearts, that would be fantastic for both of us. And you can get directly to Freedom Over Fascism at freedomoverfascism.us. And you can get to Rabbi Sandra on all the socials at Rabbi Sandra. Is it Sandra or Sandra?
It's Sandra, but it's, people pronounce it differently depending on their regions. Okay. I'm not that particular.
Okay. I'm also wanting to remind you guys that I am part of two different networks, Banner and Backbone here on Substack and the Democracy Group. So Rabbi Sandra is the executive director for Carolina Jews for Justice. She's a writer, an activist, a public speaker, a musician. And I would like to welcome you to Freedom Over Fascism.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to have you for several different reasons. One is that you write a lot about how Judaism is liberation theology. You know, how we talk every Passover about how we were slaves in the land of Egypt and that we have to remember that so that we can essentially put ourselves in place of anybody else who isn't free. And we're in a spot in the United States right now where empathy is in less supply, where the Jewish community itself is split, which I'm going to talk more with Deborah Shushan tomorrow. I know you've talked to her recently. And where both anti-Black racism and anti-Semitism are on the rise, as well as anti-immigrant, anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ plus, anti-anybody who isn't a white Christian cis het man. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've said and get your opinion on, because you sit at the crossroads of a bunch of different communities and want to get your thoughts on allyship, on thinking more universally as opposed to kind of parochially.
Yeah.
And eventually we can get to Israel, Gaza. So the Black and the Jewish communities over time didn't experience the same kind of bigotry, but historically, particularly earlier in the last century, the Jewish community had the idea if we work on everybody's freedom, then that'll be, quote, good for the Jews. And recently you wrote a post that really resonated with me. It was about Am Yisrael and how talking about Am Yisrael means we're in the struggle.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about where you think, I don't know, this is such a big topic, where you think the Jewish and Black communities are, where are the fractures, where are the points of connection, and what you mean by staying in the struggle?
Yeah, that's a lot. I'm not even sure where to start.
I know, me neither. So
I'm not sure where to start. So the struggle piece came, when the full transparency. I try to write something once a week, and and if I don't have anything, then the good standby is the Torah portion.
Right.
And we're in the Torah portion around the Jacob's name getting changed to Israel, and I was just like, oh, and I just sort of unpack that a little bit, especially with some conversations I had. So it seemed like a really good, a good connection point. So again, I'm not even sure where to start. So you can stop me at any time if I'm going on a different.
Well, I gave you like the biggest, broadest question ever, and so I figure anywhere we dive in, we'll get to where we're going.
So we all view history and sort of the history where we are in our lives at the current moment, how we arrived at our current moment, our social location in life, and all those things. I think that's part of the larger issue around the complexity of narratives in history. And so I also wrote a few weeks ago, about when the Anti-Defamation League took down their section on what we do, which is protect civil rights. So like the ADL was founded in, I think, 1913, and those, from the history of the ADL that I was taught, and how I understand it, because I used to work at the Anti-Defamation League.
It was actually my very first internship in college was at ADL.
And I'm speaking from a place where I deeply believed in the mission of the Anti-Defamation League, and was incredibly proud of the work that I did in the Civil Rights Division. I'm not trying to claim that the ADL was perfect. No job is, no place is, but the overall mission of protecting civil rights, and there's a language that still exists on the website. It's not front page because I went down Googling for it, that those folks understood that their Jewish liberation and Jewish freedom was connected to civil rights and to other people. And those folks, many of them who arrived here escaping atrocities in somewhere else, or the folks that arrived here shortly before, or early in the Nazi era and after World War II, coming here where the Holocaust, the memory of the Holocaust was so prominent in their minds, looked at what was happening to Black Americans and were like that. And many of those people are like that was wrong. And there's lots of models. I like the Albert Einstein story the best, because people don't think of Einstein as, sort of someone who focused on civil rights, but he put Black singers in his home that could not stay in the hotels that they were performing at. And and I think of Rabbi Prince of the March on Washington, and of course the iconic Heschel photo, and then Rosenthal and the bombs at the Temple Synagogue. But all those folks and many others, and also uh, the largest arrest of rabbis happened during the civil rights era in St. Augustine, Florida. But all those people heard the call of Heschel or heard the call of King plus the ADL and wanted to do their part. We like to lift up those stories and those narratives, whatever. And it was never, ever a majority of the Jewish population that supported those things. So I want people to understand that. People believe that to be true, and I get it. But there's another narrative that we don't lift up. We like to talk about the Jews that came to Selma, but we don't talk about the Jews that were in Selma. And those Jews that are in Selma right now, that they're because I've been back and forth to Selma and Montgomery plenty of times, but there's a synagogue in Montgomery that I think they're trying to get like historical status, but they now talk openly about the choices that they made during the civil rights movement, which was to do nothing. And I'm not saying that to punish them, because it's different when you fly in, do a bunch of stuff versus when you have to live and be in a relationship with people. Right. Over time, the further away we move from the memory of the Holocaust, Jews leaving urban areas, still holding on to those memories, but not actively working in relationship with Black people, not actually working in issues that affect urban people, but again, holding on to that. And many in the Jewish community who present as white have created an alternative narrative for how they see Black people, how they see Black people responding to anti-Semitism, how they see other marginalized groups responding to Jews. A lot of that is actually grounded in racial bias or some other biases that are unchecked. For example, a few years ago, I was on a call with a bunch of young millennials. And whenever I get invited to speak to young people, I'm like, that's so cool. But there were some older folks on the call too. And this lady asked me, she's like, that was really great what you said, but why did Black folks kick us out of the NAACP? And she was holding on to that narrative quite strongly. And my wife was sitting next to me. She's like, how are you going to answer this question? And I said, I understand that that's the narrative you've been told. Let's try something else, because I wasn't going to argue with this lady. I said now we can agree that the Jewish community helped establish the NAACP, but can we also agree that at some point in time, since it is a Black organization, that Black people need to run the organization themselves, and that's the narrative that I was trying to get her to see. I don't know whether or not they get kicked out, but she, in her mind, that just proved right, that in the early part of the 20th century, since Black people kicked out white Jews from NAACP, she drew a straight line to how Black folks feel about the Jewish community, which was in a negative kind of way. And I also want us to I want the Jewish community to understand that 60 plus years or more have passed from the Heschel iconic era to today. And I've told rabbis when particularly during Martin Luther King holiday to not make it Heschel Day. I mean, I'm a Heschel fan. I can talk about Heschel, and then what Rabbi said to me, well, how do I get my community to understand the importance of relationships and working together and solidarity? I said, you can model that for your community today, which I didn't say, but can you? There's a big problem. If you have to go back to an era before any of us were born, you've got a big problem. The best thing you can do is you can, yes, talk about that and honor it, but showing the relationships you have today. So I'll stop there and you can ask me more questions if I even hit on what you asked.
Well, you did, because in general, narratives are a big I gotta stop playing with my hair. Apparently it's a tick I do.
All right.
my dissertation was a history of a museum in Jerusalem, but it was mostly about narrative and how do we remember the past and how do we tell our stories about the past. And in some ways, that's very intertwined with Jewish liturgy. So the idea that so much of the Jewish community like harkens back, oh, well, look at Heschel, look at King, and, you know, all of that without really walking the walk. Although there are lots of us within the, you know, activists movement, and we can talk about that. That's an entirely different story. Who are, and I think the tension between individuals is a very different, like, I think individuals on an individual basis, as they get to know each other, as with many, many different situations, are good on a personal basis. But the idea that we have this narrative in our head of like kind of the Jewish savior at the same time as the Jewish victim, at the same time as the, I mean, it's all connected, obviously. And then when I was in college, there was the whole situation with Louis Farrakhan, and that became a thing. And now there's Israel and Gaza, and for very, very good reasons. The Jewish community is finding itself broken from itself and from others. And the idea that we are looking at the left as the source of our greatest danger, as opposed to the actual Nazis on the right, is problematic. So how would you say, there's a lot of different things too. I keep slamming you with a big old brain dump. How would you say that we, in the moment that we're in this country, that Jews come, how are most American Jews coming to this moment, and are they kind of schizophrenic about it? And also, like, what's your sense of where we are among all of the different communities that you're a member of? Did I make it too hard? I'm sorry.
No, so it is. So being angry with the left, let's put it this way. So we are always going to be more angry at our own family members and the people that we actually think we're aligned with. The crazy people we don't know, so the ultra right-wing people, we know they've always hated us, but I thought I belonged over here. So that I want to honor that. Like I totally get it. And the struggle in our part of the issue in our own community right now, if one narrative has always been lifted, so we have one narrative that we've been told about Israel, and that's sort of falling apart for some people. We have one narrative that we've always been told about our participating in the civil rights movement, and all those things can be true, but there's also another narrative that gets left out. And so, you know, I really want people to think what lens they're using when they're talking about a narrative. And so we have a Jewish state, that's great. But there's also a different narrative. There's also another group of people that gets left out of that. When we talk about, oh God, I can't remember. There was I was in the car with my wife, and there was something that came on. I'm going to butcher this. It was basically talking about how it was some talking person that was talking about how Israel was a land without a people, something like that.
No, that's Golda Meir.
Right. Okay. I don't know where it came from, but I heard that. But that's the same narrative we use for the United States, which
Right.
was a land with no people. There was millions and billions of people here and on this whole continent. And I'm not trying to make the same comparison, but the stories of how we tell things are designed to present a particular narrative to our audience. That's just how history is. That's what works. And you get a better history when you have a fuller picture, which one of the reasons when I was younger, I was so excited that I discovered Howard Zinn's history of the people's history of the United States, because it gave me a fuller picture that went with the textbook narratives that I had
Right.
always heard from, which brought in other perspectives. And multiple things can be true at the same time. And I think that for some people, that's really challenging and hard. And I think you're frozen on my screen. Okay, there you are.
Maybe I was just being still. No, I think that is really at the heart of everything that I want to talk about. And you did great to like distill it when I couldn't, is that so many different things are true at the same time.
Yeah.
And the expansive mind that needs to be able to hold those truths separately and together, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
It's really hard to be, know that there is a state for the Jews, yes. That it has been embattled, yes. That it also has done horrible things, yes. That October 7th was horrific, yes. And what Israel did to Gaza and the West Bank is horrific, yes. And in the United States, all of the similar narratives are within the Jewish community. I think it gets really, really separated out, and people don't want to think about both all the truths, or they find it easier just to kind of get insular, and instead of taking universal lessons from history and oppression and the Holocaust, they take very direct lessons that like this should never happen to the Jews again, as opposed to like this is not something we do to other people. And I'd love your opinion on how to help people see the multiple truths in all sorts of different situations. Now we're at this really painful point in world history where there's huge fractures.
The Israelis don't have this problem, and that's a bold thing. They just don't. They don't have they understand the complexity. Many of now, I'm not talking about the extremes, but many folks in Israel have been working on this for a very long time. They want a solution that benefits the Jews and Palestinians and other folks. And I say, I haven't found a better word to explain this, if you can help me with it, but there's a big difference when you approach a subject from lived experience versus theoretical experience.
Yeah.
So Israelis are in actual physical relationships with Palestinians. They live together, they work together, not saying it's perfect, but they are wrestling. They're wrestling because it's there. American Jews aren't doing that. They are not. Many are not. More so today, but many people that I have run into have incredibly biased ideas about Palestinians and Arabs and pro-Palestinian people, and sometimes when I get the opportunity to unpack that, many of these folks haven't been to Israel. I'm not saying you have to live in Israel to have an opinion. Many of these people don't actually have relationships with Palestinians or with people who think differently than them or refuse to listen. And without that experience, you are making a lot of assumptions about how somebody came to their perspective, which I think for a lot of people, that might be why some members in the Jewish community believe wholeheartedly that Black people are more anti-Semitic than white people, which is nuts to me because there's no data to prove.
Really?
Oh yeah, I hear it a lot. I wish I didn't. Maybe it's because I'm Black, they tell me that. But yeah, they believe, there's threads. They believe that Black people are more anti-Semitic than white people based off of something, probably the same data that says that, Black people are more violent because, we're overly represented in the prison system, which doesn't mean we're more violent, it just means we're overly represented in the prison system.
Right.
So, and I think that when you are, so one of the things that we're doing in Carolina Youth for Justice, we are, this is not a promotion, but it's sort of like these are the conversations.
Promote away, like.
But we are in a lane, and our lane is not Israel. Our lane is the state of North Carolina. And we are filling the void where synagogues and legacy institutions can't or don't have the capacity to do it. So we do advocacy. And because we're in the South, we cannot, other places can, but we really can't do it without Christian partners or other partners who may be Muslim or whatever to focus on issues. So I might be in a partnership with clergy. Some of them are Muslim, some of them are Black, some of them are whatever, who may have different perspectives on Israel than I do, but we are here because we don't want ICE in our backyard. We don't. That's the problem right now. We don't want immigration enforcement taking our people. That's what we're agreeing on. We're not trying to fight the Israel-Palestine battle because we'll get nothing done.
Right.
We're trying to do that. And so I lost my train of thought. Anyway, I've already had multiple conversations today, but there was a point to there. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I think what I'm hearing from you is sometimes we put so many things on the table that we have to like be in alignment on that. Really, if we can find a few things that we share values on and work on those, then we don't get so caught up in our own bullshit, like and the purity testing.
Yeah. So it allows you to build a relationship. So I'm going to bring in a rabbi friend of mine. And this is before I went to rabbinical school. His name is Joshua Lesser. He lives in Atlanta. And how he's told the story. So if he listens to this, if I get
Joshua
it wrong,
who? I'm sorry?
Joshua Lesser.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a rabbi emerita for Congregation Beit Haverim in Atlanta. One of the things that I learned from him, because we've been friends a very long time, so he was he was the first openly gay rabbi in Atlanta, and maybe the first openly gay rabbi to get accepted to rabbinical school. I don't know, but if not the first, one of the first. And so when he arrived in Atlanta as a rabbi of this gay-founded synagogue, like a lot of rabbis didn't want to have anything to do with him, work with him, and so this was like in the late 90s. And
really already that late?
Yeah, like 1998, 99 or something like that. Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy that there wasn't anybody else first, but okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's another thing too. Like people need to understand, like this history isn't that long, I mean, anyways, we had, and so he's the rabbi of his congregation. Like even he used to tell me stories that other rabbis would not share, like a hotel room with him because he's gay. So this was and that's something I actually have never thought about before. Like it's never been an issue of me rooming with anyone. Nobody's asked me about my sexual orientation or anything. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that he became a member of I think it was called 100 Black clergy or 100 Black clergy something. It was something like that. With clergy, men, Black. Those words were in the title. And he became a member of this, just like we have white people who were members of the NAACP and have served on the board of NAACP. And so he, was a member of this, and then he would always show up for the issues of the day, whether it be housing or whatever. And he was always in solidarity, always showing up, probably the only rabbi, maybe even the only Jewish person in the room. And then he said, like, many people did not understand Judaism or gayness or whatever. But then when around 2004, when Bush II was the president and trying to change state constitutions to keep gay people from getting married, which was crazy, but that was a thing that was being done. He said that like some black clergy came to him and said, I don't know what this is about, but you've always been here for me. I'm going to be here for you. And
Oh my
you
gosh.
can't do solidarity without relationships. And if you don't take the time to build relationships across difference, which means you might have to be uncomfortable sometimes, nothing's going to ever change. And so he said he was so touched that these clergy folks who may not have completely understood the issue, I don't even know if he asked, but they're like, we got you. We got you. What do you need? Because he did the work.
Right. Right.
And
I
it
mean,
wasn't doing the work so I can get something in return. It was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what my values lead. Because another thing I hear all the time is we've done all these things for other people, but they're not doing anything for us, which is
so it's like
also
this isn't a transaction, right?
Right.
Like we are living, and I think it's really hard right now to separate living your values versus what's transactional versus being protective of, you know, yourself and your family, even knowing that you may be fairly far down on the list, but you're there. And I think America, for the most part, has become so segregated, so resegregated. Maybe not in the South. I live in Boston, and my town is very diverse, but not with Black Americans, mostly with Indian Americans or Indians or Chinese American. But if you're not, I think if you're not, exactly, if you're not in relationship, you, and especially in this time when so many things are transactional, it could be easier to fall into a trap of, well, look what I did for you, why aren't you doing for me? Or, you know, and I'm wondering how we bridge that. And one of the things that, you know, everybody says and knows, because it's the truth, is that we're going to make change. And this is what you're doing. We're going to make change by doing it on the local level, right? Nobody can fix the federal government. Nobody, you know, is boiling the ocean. We need to do our stuff at home, build relationships offline, and live our values and find other people who share our values and find a way to express our values that aren't necessarily overtly political. This isn't a very easy time to do that. What do you say to people who are kind of questioning, like, it's all so overwhelming and the trauma is everywhere and they want to curl up in a little ball, but also know that they need to be engaged? How do you tell people to like follow their values, but you know, that the old, was it Hillel? We're not obliged to finish the work, but neither are we allowed to not start it. That's not how he said it. And I don't even know if it's Hillel, whatever. I think a lot of people, and particularly liberal Jewish circles, believe that, but have absolutely no idea where to start, because the problems are so large. How do you talk about that? I know that you are living that by doing, by being in an organization in North Carolina that works for people in North Carolina.
So one of the things that I think is helpful, at least because we have a diversity of constituents, that range in age. And I just sent an email to an older member who doesn't like any criticism of Israel. She's very clear about that. But she showed up for a Zoom call where we talked about, what we lose by not having a civil rights organization, the ADL, and participated in that call. And when I asked her, and she sent me an email that, basically saying how uncomfortable that is. I mean, nobody was bashing Israel in this call, but it did come up from people, some of the challenges, and she said she's going to stay engaged. I mean, that's the thing. Like, be uncomfortable. Let's learn from each other and understand. I tell people they should talk to people. Stop trying to convince people to change their minds. Talk to learn, um, and lead by example. Like, this is a silly thing, but I've been a vegan for a long time. I'm not a preachy vegan. I don't, I'm not a vegan evangelical. I've been a vegan a very long time. But people have become a vegan because they've watched how I navigate it. They're like, oh yeah, that would make kosher a lot easier. Like, I could actually go out.
Right. No.
And they said, and you've got me to see, like, how, some of my students, when I used to work at Elon, on their own, without any prodding from me, decided to have vegan options or have vegan meals because they could feed more people. Like, it wouldn't more people. They made a decision that they could get more people if they actually had food that more people could eat.
Imagine that, like, you accommodate more people and are more inclusive and you actually get more people to join. I'm sorry, I don't really understand that.
And so I'm sorry.
No worries.
I'm like, I'm not like, normally I have notes and stuff I'm writing down, and you and I just talking, and I've already had like 2 calls back to back this morning.
Okay, no, I hear you. I get the same way, like, it all gets jumbled. Okay. So let me take this in a slightly different direction. I mean, I hear you say lead by example, lead with curiosity, lead with inclusivity, and you get a long way toward where you're going, at least among like-minded folks. So I saw that Deborah Shushan just joined. Hi, Deborah. And she and I tomorrow are going to talk about the cleavages within the Jewish community. And I'm wondering how you are navigating this. I see that, okay, my son goes to a Jewish high school. It's pluralistic religiously. And, they all learn Hebrew. They all have to have Jewish studies. Fine. The school has not once uttered the word Palestinian in the last, 4 years, but certainly in the last 2.5. And I think in the professional Jewish community has gotten so far right wing. Deborah was talking to a woman today whose name I've forgotten, who was talking about the GA, the federations, and how American Jews are so much farther right wing than Israelis who know how to be critical, and yet not be feeling like there's Ilana Stockman she talked to, not how to feel like you're betraying some deeply tribal identity by being critical of policies. And I think even for me, the line between I do not like what Israel is doing and American Jews are responsible for that is a really thin line. So what do you say? What do you think about these cleavages within the Jewish community? How do we make space for our young kids? Like, my son's school's going to Israel in May, and like, he doesn't necessarily want to go because, I spent tons and tons of time in Israel. His uncle's Israel, and like, but he doesn't want to do the indoctrination trip. So, like, how do we be in conversation with the younger generation who've been taught all along, Tikkun Olam, make the world a better place? It's all about the freedom for everybody. It's all we don't dehumanize other people because we know where that leads. And then they see other people in the older, particularly professional Jews in the Jewish community, get very, very defensive and betray all those values they thought they were taught.
We need to we have to make space for diversity of thought in some way, shape, or form. Because the young people I've talked to, and not just young people, it's actually getting older, like some other sides of the,
Yeah.
more people who are older are tired of like not being able to have hard conversations, not being able to discuss or unpack the things that they've heard, to get clarity. Like I've never been to Israel. I hear things. I've never been to Israel, but I've heard these things. Like what explain them to me, and nothing. And so there's a huge outcry from people that want to be able to talk in Jewish spaces about the lack of understanding. Rabbi Susan Talby said the other day to me, Rabbi Susan Talby is in St. Louis. She said many Americans have the sin of certainty, the sin of knowing things you know nothing about. But we need to make spaces for hard conversations. That's one of the things that we're doing. We're trying to fill that void in ways that we can here in North Carolina. And at the same time, there are many people fed up with many of our legacy institutions, whether they be synagogues, JCCs, or whatever, in their area. That's Stella. She's been
Stella.
snoring. And we need to make spaces for them, because there's already people leaving institutions for a variety of reasons before this, but this is just making it harder. I do wonder. I am curious about if the Anti-Defamation League is losing money from donations, individual donations, in the wake of all of this, because we did a Zoom call the other day, and many of the people on that call were older than a certain age, and many of them hadn't heard that the ADL had done that, and they were disheartened. But they already had some criticism of the ADL to begin with, but that this was like, somebody did say they weren't going to give money to the ADL anymore. So I don't. Was not the purpose of the call. Was not to bash the ADL. The purpose of the call was to, what do we do without a designated? Basically, what happens when we don't have a designated civil rights organization?
I think this is also part of the larger, like, what organizations are needed or are suited to this time. Like synagogues are kind of maybe not like as central a place as they used to. Maybe we need like places where there's more pluralism. And if we have more pluralism in practice, maybe we'll have more pluralism in thought, although the high school has proven that to be not true. So without our own civil rights organization, and with all these other different organizations, there was a dust up between Chris Van Hollen and the Washington, D.C. JCRC, because Van Hollen essentially called him a Netanyahu apologist. Because I think professional Jews feel I don't know. They might. I imagine that they might feel some sort of responsibility for holding up this land that they've always conflated with being Jewish, and now unconflating it is really hard. I don't know. The institutional question is a big one on my mind right now.
I saw the little bubble that showed up. I don't know why those things show up every once in a while. Did you see it? I don't know.
I thought that the thumbs down.
Yeah. Well,
I
first
don't
of
know
all,
who did it. I don't know how they did it.
I mean, the 2013 Pew study, the 2020 Pew study, all show that the biggest demographic of Jews are the nuns, so the unaffiliated. Um, and you know, the other thing it shows is that people under 30 um, who are unaffiliated are incredibly proud to be Jewish, love being Jewish, but it's just express their Judaism differently. For many of them, it's social justice, social action, not prayer. Um, oh, I know. So this goes back to what I was saying. Was thinking about saying at some point. One of the things that I'm trying to do where we are is leading with. It's just not enough to say Tikkun Olam, I'm doing this, which is wonderful value. It doesn't work so well with Israelis because they don't really understand. It's not part of their ecosystem, but many of the folks that come to our things, their Jewish expression is through social action. So everything that we do has to have some kind of Jewish frame, and we just don't just show up because we're Jews. We do frame it in some text. All of our staff meetings now start with some form of text, because I think that to have a conversation or to do the work, it's incredibly important to really understand, what do the rabbis say, or how do we interpret what the rabbis say about this thing? Why is it so important that we show up for our neighbors? Why is it so important that we escort kids to school because ICE is here? Why is it so important that we hand out know your rights training as Jews? Like, because if we don't do that, then we're just another organization with a constituency that shows up, but we're unique, and we can do things. We can organize folks through a Jewish lens to show up in the bigger pro-democracy ecosystem. And so I think that any of the work that we do, I think it's incredibly important to ground it in Jewish values, our Jewish text, or something that unpacks what we're doing. Because I've talked to people that see the Torah that's just old, it's not relevant, and the things that I do are incredibly attractive to them. And I don't do this, but there's other rabbis that do similar things too. But I can make the Torah relevant. It is relevant if you take the time to have somebody who understands it unpack it. Because if you just read it, like, what does this have anything to do with me? But the beautiful thing about our tradition is that every year I get to read the same thing, and what I write today, well, some rabbis do just repeat what they wrote, but I don't.
Oh, it's Rosh Hashanah. It's time to get out the Rosh Hashanah.
I'm not bad. Maybe if I was a public rabbi, I might make different choices, but it's incredibly important for me to always see the text through a fresh lens. And what I do is I'll start reading it and I'll get stuck on something. And the thing that I'm stuck on is that's usually what I start writing about. And this time around was when I started thinking about Jacob's name. And I hadn't really thought of it that way before. And then this time frame that we're in, because I hear on Israel Chai so much, and often it's not in a good way. I have heard it used in ways that I'm kind of disgusted by. So I'll give you one example. I was in a big group of folk, big group of Jewish conference, and someone offered a kavanah for Mordechai Kaddish. It was beautiful, and brought in Palestinians as well as Israelis. It wasn't like a one thing. It was really beautifully done for a diverse room. And some dude yelled in an angry way right before Mourner's Kaddish, Israel Chai. Why? It was so. It wasn't. He didn't say it under. And I later found out, because the word took him somewhere else, and he heard something completely different to which I've heard from somebody else. His wife was like, "What conversation were you in?" Again, I don't know any, but the that it's one of the things I've been telling our staff people is, when we bring people into we ask them to go to bystander training. We tell them where to go for bystander training. We tell them where to go for training on how to deal with immigrants. I said we also need to help our community understand. They might see a lot of kafiyas. They might see pro-Palestinian information, and they need to, we need to help them to be uncomfortable with it. But I've been to a lot of these here. I do see a lot of pro-Palestinian stuff. I do see a lot of kafiyas. I've never seen anybody say anything negative about Jews in any of these things. Rooms, hundreds of people in rooms, and some of those people do have on kippot. Like I've seen I've met rabbis. I have seen rabbis at many of these trainings, but I've also seen Jewish community members. But people have to be willing to be uncomfortable. Now, we are also in this new era where wearing a keffiyeh is triggering for people. Like somebody else that annoyed me who I unfollowed, I think is a rabbi. It was equating the keffiyeh to a KKK hood. And I was like, oh, no. And then you did get a lot of pushback from that. I don't push people that I barely know online. I just quiet them.
Well, that's what I do too. Is like, yeah, like you're not going to change their mind. Although if you engage, you might reach somebody who's watching as a bystander. But mostly I just block and move on.
One of the problems, if you've never actually, this is why I go back to the theoretical. If you've never actually experienced an actual attack on your identity and you've only heard it. So like if you can't find an experience that is relative to your own and you have to pull from somebody else's experience, that means you don't have an experience. It means the only thing that you can equate, because it bothers you. And instead of pulling from your own tradition and your own feelings about how that makes you feel, you go borrow what you think somebody else might feel, which is just wrong. And people do that all the time. But that just shows that one of the ways that whiteness has worked its way into Judaism is the being uncomfortable to talk about our own pain.
Interesting. And I hate that we are at 1:55 and I want to now talk to you for an hour about whiteness and Judaism.
We can do it again. Maybe you and me and Deborah can all get on calls.
Oh, we should do that. We should do that because there's the whiteness that is infiltrating Judaism, but also the fact that most white Jews feel, Deborah says yes, feel white presenting as opposed to like thoroughly white, and yet have the privilege of light skin, yet are not Christian and are on the other side of all of a lot of the hate. So I think that would be a really interesting thing. And the whole idea that you would equate Judaism and whiteness when it's not, like,
right.
It's not an appropriate frame. It's not a historically useful frame. It's not a realistic.
Well, it isn't a reality in the sense that whiteness, because these are all social constructs, has evolved over time. So if you go back to when whiteness became a thing in the United States, the only people in that group are white, are male and British, because no other group is allowed into that. And over time, other groups have been. And so Jews who present as white are benefiting from white privilege, are seen as white, and it's coming at a cost at the same cost that it came to with other folks. So like when Italians became white, they just get absorbed in white culture and sort of losing the Italian identity, or it is a ancestral identity, but it's not part of, it's not like a hyphenated identity. And so for Jews who are still holding on to a minority status, a religious minority status, still can also benefit from white privilege, but it's conditional. It can be taken away. But when people tell me that they're, when we're talking about racial issues, and I get pushback, oh, I'm not white, and you won't talk about anything else because you refuse to see that you were presenting in a way that I can't in our society, because nobody's going to um, um, take the time, first of all, to ask you if you're if you're Jewish, to treat you differently. If you outwardly present as a Jewish person in America, meaning you were wearing the like black and white and a kippah or something, like those folks are actively presenting as Jewish. But when people try to tell me that they understand a Black experience because of anti-Semitism, but they can easily take their Jewishness off, or don't tell people that they're Jewish, you don't understand. You're not understanding. And there's plenty, because I live in the South, and I play, everything I do professionally is under the umbrella of Rabbi Sandra. So that means I also play music in places, I don't know what people think about Jews, but it says Rabbi Sandra on there. Now people have asked me if that was my first name, but they know.
Okay.
But most people know that I'm a rabbi, and I've had people come up to me and whisper, well, I'm Jewish too. And I'm like, why are you whispering? Oh, anti-Semitism. I'm like, you see that marker over there? It says Rabbi Sandra. Like, did you miss that?
that should have been a clue.
Yeah, like, I've been introduced at festivals, Rabbi Sandra. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, I'm not trying. People need to do what makes them comfortable. But if you're only living off of fear and you don't actually have any experience, it makes it harder to navigate. I can't pretend to not be Black, and I have actually experienced racism in this society. And some Jews experience anti-Semitism and many Jews don't, but that doesn't mean the anti-Semitism is not real.
Right, but it also doesn't mean it's the same as racism.
Right.
And as a system, racism is a whole other discussion, that racism is the system of oppression and not just interpersonal bigotry.
Right.
But but those threads can be really hard. And as you said, people need to live in their own experience, but also people need to, as you said, live in discomfort.
Yeah.
That's not their own experience. So I guess it depends on who's willing to push themselves into a less comfortable space and stay there.
But also
reach out.
When Jews immigrated to this country, when Jews came to this country, particularly around the World War II era, before and after, they were, how I've read this history, so excited to be here. We're not going back to that other place. How do we become Americans, and trying to assimilate as fast as possible, or become an American? And there were some walls along the way. And it's gone again. And
that just makes me feel better, because that's how my brain works too.
Yeah.
So if it comes to you, great, jump in. Yeah. And if it doesn't, then we'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
Because I'd love to stay in conversation. Sometimes, I don't know. Sometimes the Jewish piece of me and the activist piece of me end up bifurcated. And sometimes it's nice to bring them together again and get to the root of why I hold the values I do, and what's the textual basis, and the concept of disagreement being so woven into our history and being, whereas white Christians, nationalists, that's the antithesis of what they are. I think is fascinating.
And people need to understand how racism functions in a society versus how anti-Semitism functions in society. Racism, capitalism, slavery, it's still that. And anti-Semitism is a cudgel, it's a wedge to pit groups against other folks. That's overly simplification of the whole thing.
Yeah, but generally correct.
Yeah. Yes.
Oversimplified, but generally correct.
Yeah.
So we've reached the top of the hour. I want to thank you for coming on, even though you had plenty of other stuff to do today, and we have 80 people right now,
Oh, hi.
and um,
I'm not paying attention to it. I'm just not even on.
mostly it wasn't a chat that
Mhm.
was interactive. I want to give you the chance to talk about all the things that you do and kind of sell yourself and tell people where to find you.
Oh, yeah.
So this is your time to plug
Oh.
anything that you would like.
So I'm the executive director of Carolina Jews for Justice, which we're a statewide organization that organizes Jews in North Carolina, but we advocate for all folks in North Carolina. We just do it through a lens. I have a Substack. In fact, you were right at the beginning. You can find me on any platform as Rabbi Sandra. Sometimes it might say Rabbi Sandra Lawson or Rabbi Sandra Music, I think is another thing. But basically, if you go to Instagram, Facebook, all the legacy socials, you can find me under Rabbi Sandra. And I write, I play music. My creative expression allows me to do to do hard things.
You know how much in a lot of these circles, we talk about that so much, is the creative expression that allows us to do this. That's another conversation entirely that I have to make sure I get to. So thank you so much for coming. Everybody who's joined us, Josh just put in your URL, and Josh is not just any Josh. That is my husband, who is upstairs in the same house. So if all of you subscribe to Rabbi Sandra, if you can subscribe to Freedom Over Fascism, and if you can afford a paid subscription, I know times are really hard, that would be great. And thank you all for being here. All right, I'm going to